All right, folks, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to make sure everyone's got signed up that wants to be. All right, thank you all for coming out tonight. It's good to see such a big crowd. It seems like this is growing. Who do we have first?
Well, we have a number of people. Before I open up here, there are cookies, there's wine, there's juice, there's water. You all should eat some, bring some, take some. You should not feel you're trapped in your chair for the next however long. Feel free to go eat something. And our first reader is basically our first reader ever. That is, he was the first reader at our first meeting, Dave Waldrop.
Oh boy.
I brought a book that I want to read tonight.
Good night.
No, I better not, so I ain't something. Actually, I got one page. I think it's 200 words. It's called Students Protecting Students. As I watch scenes of the horrific mass murder at Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, I wonder, should students develop their own safety security teams? The purpose would be to augment the efforts of on-site resource officers using technology that they already have along with their innate intelligence. The initiative could work. Law enforcement training would round out the details of skills and personal characteristics needed for implementation. Students have already begun to take political action on their own behalf with elected officials. They will sadly find out that too many politicians are beholden to the National Rifle Association, NRA. Those indebted to the NRA will delay, double talk, condescend, and obfuscate. That's an 8-cent word right there, obfuscate, if you don't know. But those students who see the drastic need for change will hopefully vote in the next election. In the meantime, maybe they can help themselves with their own energy and brains. No, I am not advocating that students arm themselves. There are other effective ways that students can prevent or minimize casualties. We're talking about hundreds of attentive eyes and ears working in the interest of protecting themselves and other students. Think about that.
We have another Waldrop, Ella Waldrop. Welcome.
Hi, I'm gonna play off of what he said for just a minute. I am a student at Smoky Mountain High School, and I have not been writing as long as most of you have, but I'm going to try. For the blank page by myself. I live for the blank page. So much you can help it become. For you have absolute dictatorship. It's yours to control. Many people want absolute power. Writing gives you absolute power. People wait for others to say some of it, only half of what they long to say. I live for the blank page, not for the power, but for the voice. You have the right to express yourself. Express what you've seen or heard. You have the power over your blank page. What will your blank page say?
Welcome, Ella. Hope we'll be hearing from you again. James Staggers.
published this book in 2012, and took 7 years to write it. So as I read a little bit of it, I want you to remember that these comments were formulated going back to 2005. And I think it's very appropriate for what's going on in our world today. Why you might want to read these messages. You are concerned about society's future. As a concerned grandparent, offer seeds you can fertilize to motivate your descendants. You would have liked to receive messages from your ancestors. You are concerned that apathy has prevailed too long. You believe the two-party political war is degrading our government's effectiveness. Offers food for thought solutions. You believe lobbyists should not exist. You are not comfortable being either a Republican or Democrat and would prefer to erase that feeling. You are concerned money spent determines the outcome of elections. As a college student, you have the motivation to change the current political debacle. It provides a cheap operating officers' businesses experiences, that's me. Offers the author's learning curve in restoring parental kalosis. You are concerned working parents are too busy to parent. You are concerned too many parents expect the school teacher to perform the parent's responsibility. You are concerned that our education system is not successful with below average intelligent students. You are concerned that too many of our youngsters are being coddled. You believe lawsuits are over the top. And now I'm going to read from chapter 4, which is titled, A Proposed New Democracy Void of Politicians. Unfortunately, an increasing percentage of the population find themselves moving from a middle-class income to a reduced economic quality of life. Hopefully, this realization will generate activism and reduce the number of individuals who have lived an apathetic life. History has demonstrated that result. Human nature dictates that the good life results in political apathy. That is the reason politicians get re-elected, despite promoting their selfish interests. A minority of voters, because of their wealth and consequential influence, control government decisions and policy. That worked just fine as long as that minority acted in the best interest of total society. That culture has evaporated during my lifetime. The majority of the wealthy exhibit little or no concern that the economic middle class in the great USA is dwindling in numbers. It is my sincere hope that 50 years from now, my descendants' generation will view the U.S. political climate of 2011 and 2018 as my generation views the Civil War. At the time of the Civil War, obviously my ancestors were not apathetic about slavery. Will it take bullets to solve the extreme right versus the extreme left disagreement? Brothers killing each other due to a difference of opinion. On February 2, 2006, the chairman and CEO of Titan International, Inc. placed a full-page opinion in the USA Today. He states, Americans, are you stupid? The solution to any problem in America is common sense. It was heartening to read that another person exhibits a passion to offer solutions. That this interest is not observable in the majority of Washington, D.C. lawmakers. I'm not in agreement with Mr. Taylor's proposed solutions. However, I totally support his common sense approach. My solutions are offered in Chapter 5. I've been espousing this need for change in government for the past 20 years. Congress has deteriorated to nearly total ineffectiveness. For almost 2 years, Congress was consumed with passing the health care bill. I forecast that our legislators will continue to escalate that ineffectiveness in continued disagreement to repeal the health care law. All of this waste of time and money could have been eliminated if the voters had made the decision rather than the politician. Of course, that's still going on today, like that forecast. The USA Today published election results from yesterday that included 54 ballot initiatives in 26 different states. That voter decision-making process works and epitomizes the democratic process. Present the facts and let the voters, taxpayers, determine the changes that will occur. I was a resident of the state of California in 1978 when Proposition 13 was made law by voter initiative. I was positively impressed at the time as a 41-year-old voter that individuals rather than politicians had the legal power to exercise their will. It would also save the taxpayers $1 zillion. We don't need and can't afford 535 politicians sitting in Washington, D.C. Add to that all their staffs, costs, and pensions. Their expense accounts could also be eliminated. What I propose for your consideration will initially strike you as unrealistic. I believe it is realistic, however, definitely out of the box. Radical change always creates fear and uncertainty. Given our unproductive political war, overcoming fear and status quo seems well worth the effort. Polls report that nearly 70% of Americans, I believe that's up in the 80s now, are disgusted with the situation in Washington, D.C. Why not consider taking action to fix our broken government system? The politicians will never fix it. They can't rise above their personal interests to even consider term limits. If we had one person in Washington, D.C. for each state, legislative costs would be reduced by 90% immediately. Amazing. One decision and we accomplish a multitude of solutions. I see your negative body language in my mind already. I realize it is radical, however, please don't quit on me until you read the supporting details. In order to separate my proposed revolutionary system from our current ineffective one, I will refer to this one person as a state administrator. The term representative in Washington, D.C. has many years ago lost its positive image for me. The term senator is likewise distasteful. The state administrators are elected by voters and report directly to the Vice President of the United States. Isn't it about time that our Vice President was actually assigned by law a degree of daily responsibility? The state administrators elect within their own body a committee chairman as determined by issues requiring solutions at the present time. The committee chairman appoints 4 additional committee members that provide the opportunity to be solving 10 issues simultaneously. Currently, we don't solve 10 major issues in a decade. The committee's responsibility is to assemble and structure the issue and provide this data to 3 universities to develop conclusions and propose solutions. The universities are to work independently, void of collaboration, an infringement of the guideline, and the university loses its government grant. It's refreshing to consider that our brightest young minds actually be presented with a challenging responsibility rather than writing a thesis that society never utilizes. Graduate students would be highly motivated to participate in a competition to be part of the grant. It would be significant on their resume.
Thank you. Our next reader is another member who goes back to the early days, which were actually not that long ago, but still, Matt Nelson.
All right, for those of you who don't know what I do, I like to take song titles of a particular artist and try to make a story out of it. I've done it before with Asia, Eagles, Sticks. And this one I decided, this is kind of more in memory of someone who died. And I recently picked up a copy of one of their greatest hits, and for next to nothing, I liked them. And after finding, kind of like a collection online of what the titles were, things started to kind of flow normally. So I said, if you know who this is, don't say it because,
Spoiler alert.
yeah, don't say it out loud because if you know who this person is, think of something they've done and there's no age limit. You'll be taken all the same. Come on, let's dance to one more song. Living under the pressure of society is fun. I said, how about going someplace underground, far from the madmen and all the chaos they bring? It said, changes in life can be so sudden, taking away joy. It said, no one knows when their golden years begin or end. People get so caught up in obtaining fame, they forget they're trapped in the Moon Age daydream. It ain't easy going through life on your own. Luckily, I'm here as the world falls down. I'm not some starman from a distant world, and no more of a space oddity than yourself. Just think of me as your blue jean genie to show you there's a happy land much closer than you think, as magic lies within your heart, waiting to spring forth. How about singing if there's life on Mars, or dancing across the stardust even farther away? All this mothering love has gotten in the way. Sound and vision are replaced with twisted fantasy, leading to living in an occasional daydream. However, a little wonder can provide a colossal distraction. We we all go through times of great uncertainty, so we have to survive and grow no matter what. It's up to the dreamers like you to light the way into a better future. We're all born to understand all the mysteries of life. And so, are you ready to begin this fantastic voyage of dreams? Be a rebel against all the gloom and lost ideas. We're right now, but at a gateway of life. You can become the shining future legend, or another who let their dreams slip away. Happiness is here today, gone tomorrow. So meaning you have to find and never let go your soul love. Let's spend this night together, not thinking of grief, so that we can toast to the young Americans, trying to slow down the speed of life a little more. Keep your joy and never let me down. So I'd march proudly to the beat of your drum, leading others to the shining star of peace. So yet there will be zeros among you, caught in the nasty web of a glass spire, never knowing, it said, the miracle good night. I feel sorry for the man who sold the world, not knowing time will crawl all the way to oblivion, with no control of how long the journey will take. The heroes of old are long gone from this world, stolen from the blackout of human imagination, so leaving a sense of doubt where the sky should be, creating a black star blocking out much of the hope. Ashes to ashes, choking out chance for improvement. But that's what happens when the wind blows foul. So I hope our meeting is more than wishful beginnings, so that you'll be outside the oncoming despair. There's something in the air that calls me tonight. Perhaps this is another one of the angels' adventure. Who will join you? He said, on your brilliant adventure. He said, don't be afraid without me by your side. As wild as the wind, he said, I can speak to you often, telling you that the pretty star is in your heart. He said, and you need to hang on to yourself as long as possible. Make the next feel a little less daunting. He said, you'll set the world on fire with love, making the dollar days no more. He said, dancing out in space as a star of hope. And the name of the artist is?
David Bowie?
Very good. Sadly, I saw Labyrinth about a few months before. The first time I ever saw Labyrinth was a few months before he died.
A classic of its time. Our next reader, I believe, is Trish Baker. Welcome.
Well, I do historical fiction, or at least that's what I attempt to do. And this is a piece from a chapter of a book I'm working on now. It's set in 1784 at the time when Morganton was just becoming a town. And in this piece, John Cooper and his son Joe, who will be the speaker in this particular chapter, are headed to a place sort of remote from the town. They've been up on the town square where they're all busy with the bustle of building. And now their sister, the daughter, Mary Jane, who is a healer of sorts, a kind of a nurse, has been called to help a lady who is out in the woods. And so here we go. Green Street was rutted enough, but the way turned into an even rougher road once we were out of town. Still, Papa's cart managed to hold together as it bumped along over rocks and stony washes. Once we put enough distance between us and the clamor of construction around the square, I pulled Ladybug up alongside the cart bench where I was able to be part of the conversation Mary Jane was having with Papa. "Have you ever been on High Peak Ridge, Papa?" Mary Jane asked. "I helped Sam Greenlee track a mountain lion out this way once," Papa replied, "but we were lucky. We brought him down before he got up on that ridge where it runs southward and deeper into the mountains. That's wild country up there. Do you know anyone who lives around here?" "The Mull place lies along that road we were on before we turned eastward. Can't say that I know of anyone else," Papa replied. "Considering what we learned today, though, there must be a farm with slave labor somewhere around." We passed a few sunny meadows dotted here and there among the oaks and sourwood trees. The land looked rich enough for crops, but any plantations there might have been were well hidden from the road. Buzzards circling lower and lower pointed to some kind of dead meat on the ground, but it was just as likely wild game as a farm animal. We found the deep creek Mr. Roster spoke of, and as Papa maneuvered the cart along the bank through tangled roots and undergrowth, our way grew darker from the shade of the deepening forest. Hills on both sides did their fair share of blocking the sun as well. As we ventured upstream, the surrounding ridges appeared to grow taller and nearer to the creek's edge until they squeezed in on the water and forced it to rush through the narrows. From behind the cart, I saw one wheel slip dangerously close to the water, and there was no room for my pony to pass between the wagon and the hill wall to the west. I feared that if we went further, the cart might be pinned between those hills forever, but before that happened, the pathway was blocked by the roots of a willow tree that had grown deep down from the hilltop and reached to the stream bed. We were forced to stop the cart, but Ladybug and I managed to wade around to the other side of the roots. The willow tendrils tickled the back of my neck, but I waved them aside as I plodded through and finally found a pathway westward up the slope. "Stay in the cart, Mary Jane," Papa ordered. "Joe, with me." We left Mary by the gushing water, and Papa and I hiked up to the top of the rise to a field covered in tall intertwining grasses and peppered with daisies, goldenrod, and Queen Anne's lace. From there we spied a lone homestead deep in the shadowy holler. "We found it," I called back to Mary Jane, and I ran down to fetch her. "This must be the Finn place." Papa waved my sister up the hill while I grabbed the basket and led Ladybug up to the field where I tethered her. Then I followed my family as they descended into the dark cove holding the farmhouse. "Mrs. Finn," Papa called into the shadows, "my girl Mary Jane's here to see to you." No one answered. There was no sign of life around the farm. The outbuildings and fences showed no sign of disrepair, but there were no sheep or chickens, no horse nor mule, not a single person, and certainly no slave boy. 2 long bare porches wrapped from the front toward each side of that little cabin. Or was it 2 cabins under one roof? "Why is there a gap through the middle of this house, Papa?" I asked. "Is one side the kitchen?" "'Tis an old-style cabin," Papa replied as he stepped into the night-like shadow that fell under roof between the 2 sides of the cabin. "Some call it a dog trot, for animals can shelter in this pass-through when the weather calls for it. This one has been here for quite a while from the look of things." There were 4 doors under that roof, 2 on each side. At the first door we come to, the hinges creaked as they swung open under Papa's knock. He stepped cautiously inside. "Mrs. Finn?" he called again. No answer. "Reckon she's already dead," I whispered. Papa checked the parlor while Mary Jane and I walked silently through the passage to the other room on the south half of the building. It was an eating room. There was a cupboard for dishes and shelves filled with dusty jars and crocks of jam and potted meat set by for the winter, but there was no sign of recent use. The door there led back out to the dirt floor of the dog trot, and across that there were 2 more rooms mirrored in the north half of the house. The first we entered was a bedroom with dust layered so thick atop the patchwork quilt that its color and design were uncertain. Even the green curtains and a green woolen shawl draped over a chair by the window were nearly brown with dust. The only life we saw was a squirrel with pale fur scampering through a crack in the wall. There was one more room to explore, and it was bound to hold Mrs. Finn or what was left of her. I stood back, and Mary Jane swallowed hard before pushing the thin plank door open. The hinges groaned, and when the door opening was wide enough, we craned our necks to peek inside. A woman we took to be Mrs. Finn lay there in the bed with her face to the wall. The ashes in her fireplace were dark, but the hearthstones were still warm from a recent fire. "Mrs. Finn," Mary Jane whispered, "we're here to help you if you need us." I snaked my head around the door even further. "Is she dead?" I asked with barely more than a breath. My sister set her basket on the floor and tiptoed toward the small gray-haired woman who looked nearly swallowed up by her blue and yellow quilt. She touched the wrinkles on the old lady's neck with the back of her hand. "She's warm," Mary Jane said. And then she turned toward me and Papa to announce, "She's alive at least." Papa and Mary Jane did their best to rouse her, but Mrs. Finn refused to wake up. We propped the old lady up a bit on her pillow, and Mary washed her patient's face and wrists with cool water from the fireplace bucket. There was no sign of blood, bruises, nor fever, but something was surely wrong. "Mary Jane, you may need your herbs," Papa said. "I'm going home to fetch your supplies. Joe and Ladybug will stay with you here till I get back." I helped Papa check around the place, but we found no signs of danger nor anything troublesome. 'Twas my job to make another pass for the house while Papa returned to Mary and her patient. Is there a gun here? Papa asked when I joined them. There's a rifle rack in the sitting room, I replied, but 'tis empty. There's no pouch nor shot neither. There's no axe by the chopping block, but there's ample kindling here by the hearth. Someone may be robbing that poor sick widow of her tools already, Papa replied. 'Tis perhaps someone helping her, Mary Jane suggested. There's no dust in here and the hearth is tidy enough. Or perhaps she only bothered to keep up this room since she lived alone, Papa replied. Joe, I'm leaving my rifle with you. Use this only if you need to, he instructed as he held it out for me. No hunting, do you understand me? Papa, I have my hatchet and slingshot. We can fasten the doors if we need to. Keep your rifle for the road, I insisted. Papa rested the rifle back at his side as he directed, you go get Ladybug and tie her up under the dog cart shelter till I get back. And then Papa turned to my sister. Mary Jane, are you and Mrs. Spence safe enough here? I'll be fine, Papa. As wild as Joe is, I have to admit he's clever. He'll keep a good watch. We'll be safe till you come back. Ladybug settled comfortably under the dog trot, and when I looked for water to fill her trough, I found more than I bargained for. There's a cold spring out there, I reported, as I dropped 2 buckets of water by the door. There's a stone spring house, too, and it had some milk and cheese in it. There'll be plenty to eat, at least. Joe, I don't see any goats, and there's snake root about. Leave the milk and cheese be, Papa advised. I have food, Joe, and you found water. We'll be fine when Papa gets back, Mary Jane said. Then I'll get on the road and hope to return quickly, Papa said as he picked up his rifle. We waved at him until he disappeared over the hill. The groan of the cart was loud enough to reach us, and we heard the wheels grinding over river rocks as Papa turned around for the ride back home. Mary Jane and I were alone with the mistress of Snake Root Cove.
Our next reader is Gail May. Welcome.
I'm about to change the tone of things a little bit. Most of these have had something serious or something worthwhile. This is just a fun read. The title is called Love and Vaseline. Let your mind go real fast.
I'm already there.
Vaseline! Get yourself down here this minute. Vaseline rolled her eyes and gave a quick complaint to her brother, X-Lax, and her sister, Dayquil. What could Mama want now? As she grumbled her way down the short staircase of the tired old farmhouse, she slapped at a fly that insisted on circling her head like a befuddled helicopter. South Georgia summers were nothing like the images portrayed in the thrift shop novels her mama collected and devoured, much like Vaseline did her favorite Sourball candies. Summer in Delight, Georgia was sticky and sweltering. The thermometer had not read lower than 97 degrees for 12 days now, and there wasn't a cloud to be found in the entire county. Whatever Mama wanted, Vaseline prayed that it didn't require much in the way of physical effort. Yes'm, you be calling me? Get yourself over here, child. Help me get this big old pot down from this here shelf. Now her mama had Vaseline's attention. Mama never pulled down that big old pot, less'n she was fixing to make some of her special brew what came around Christmas time every year. Them special brews was real popular with them that had a little money down in town. And Vaseline, X-Lax, and Dayquil usually could count on a visit from Santy if enough of them town people showed up for the market day. Was Vaseline about to experience Christmas in July? She heard of such, but had no real firm evidence that such a holiday really existed. What we fixing to do, Mama? You gonna make up some brew, Mama? Nah, Lean, it ain't time to be fixing my brew just yet. We gonna do something most special today. It's hot, and you and your brother and sisters, y'all need a little cooling and a little schooling. Before we get on downhill, I need you to help me tote this thing out to the yard. After 30 minutes of truly hard physical work, which meant God must have been real busy somewhere else in the world or was trying to avoid the heat himself so he couldn't answer Vaseline's earlier prayer. That huge pot was set up in the middle of the clean, swept dirt yard and was now filled with clear, cool water, which had been delivered by a meandering, leaking, ancient garden hose stretched like a dry snakeskin across the yard. Mama still hadn't let on to what this was all about. But without preface, she stood up and she said, "Go fetch the young'uns and do them quick before I change my mind." Still puzzling over what might be happening to her mama's mind, and thinking still about that possible July Christmas, Vaseline found sudden energy and enthusiasm as she bounded up the stairs to do Mama's bidding. She certainly wasn't going to dawdle and perhaps miss a chance to discover if this is what Christmas in July was all about. Y'all go down to the yard now, Mama says. And to Vaseline's amazement, the two siblings responded rapidly and good-naturedly. Was it boredom? Curiosity? Apathy? Who knew? Vaseline didn't care. She didn't take time to wonder about this unusual cooperation. And within minutes, the three hot, dusty, and curious children stood before their mama. In unison, they said, "Yes'm." Mama nodded her head toward the gigantic pot and then said the unheard of. "Y'all get in there and y'all set a spell. Cool off. Listen while I says what I got to say." Vaseline looked at X-Lax to see if she'd heard what her ears were acclaiming. X-Lax looked at Vaseline, then Dayquil. Dayquil wasn't listening to nobody. She was already half into that humongous iron pot, eager to feel the cool before her mama came back to her mind. Vaseline and X-Lax rapidly followed Dayquil's example and lunged for the pot. They slipped in and disappeared into the depths of the cool, clear water before exploding back to the top, laughing and squealing at their good fortune, even if it probably meant Mama was a little off her rocker today. Vaseline was certain that that cool, lapping water in that old iron pot was a gift that only Christmas in July could deliver. Lost in her happy thoughts, she was startled when after several minutes, Mama began speaking. The kids wrapped their upper bodies over the top of the ancient wash pot, resembling assorted wet laundry waiting to be hung out to dry in the breathless heat of summer, each eager not to miss Mama's next miracle gift. Y'all nice and cool," said Mama. "Yeah? Good. Well, then y'all just float yourselves in that nice, cool pot, and I'm going to tell y'all the story on how you got them names you's a-wearing. I know you gets tired of people asking all about you be named Vaseline and X-Lax and Dayquil, but I figure it's time y'all be told the truth. Yep, you get those names 'cause of love, and that's the truth. The Lord help me, Jesus kind of truth. You see, when your daddy and I was young and getting to know one another, he had the worst case of allergies I done ever seen. He was always a hacking and a spitting, and it was nigh impossible to get to know him. I thought he was the handsomest, gentlest man I done ever seen, but I couldn't hardly talk to him for all that coughing going on. I thought, and finally I told him one day, "I can fix that cough of yourn." "Oh yeah," he say. "How you planning on doing that with that one?" You get rid of this old dang cough been a ragging on me, and woman, I'm gonna marry you. So I tells him, "You take this here box of X-Lax home with you and you take that whole box of it, and we talk in the morning. He looked at me like I was asking him to swallow a catfish whole. But I told him, just you do it. Next morning I go by where he was a-looking and I say to him, I see you ain't coughing no more. And before your daddy could say anything, his boss man walked up and he said, Dylan, you ain't coughed all morning. What's happening? And that's when I say, I cured him with the X-Lax. Before that boss man can tell me that X-Lax don't cure no coughs, I tell him it sure do. Look at there how Dylan's a standing with his legs all squoze together. He's flat too scared to cough. And your daddy, being a man of his word, he goes down on his knees then and asks me to marry him. So X-Lax, you can see why I am mighty partial to your name. It brung me your daddy. Now, I'm supposing you be a little curiosity about your name too, Vaseline. It be just as important to the story as X-Lax. You see, after we was married, we had to live with your granny and grandpa for a while. It was real nice, except it was really hard to get us any privacy. And when you young and you in love and want to start a family, privacy pretty important. Especially when your family don't believe in knocking on your bedroom door. I had to put my thinking cap back on and figure out how me and Dylan could get us a little of that privacy. And once again, thinking paid off. One day before your daddy headed off to work, I told him to stop at the Rexall. And on his way home, pick us up a jar of Vaseline. I wouldn't answer none of his questions, no sir. Just told him if he wanted a little privacy, bring home that jar like I done asked. I'm telling you, that were one long day. I was all full of romantic notions, couldn't wait to start working on my family. That night, when we get to our room, I asked your daddy for that jar of Vaseline. He pulled it out from the back pocket of his work pants. I unscrewed that big old lid and I got me a big old gob of it. And then I went to our bedroom door and opened it. Where are you going and what you doing, your daddy asked. I ain't going nowhere but right here, honey bunch. You just wait a minute. Slowly I starts rubbing that Vaseline all over that exterior doorknob until a heavy coating made it nigh near impossible to get a grip on that door and open that knob. Closing that door, I grinned and I tell your daddy, I'm ready for us to start making us a family. So Vaseline, honey, you can see why your name be so special to me and your daddy. Dayquil, honey, you may be the baby, but your name is just as special. We chose your name to remind us that our time with our children is limited to days and years that runs by way too fast. We know the day will come when we have this whole house to ourselves and we be all missing y'all and remembering the good times like the splashing around in this big old pot here today. So whenever we call your name, it's a reminder to us both to love our children and be good to them. Because when we's old and our house be empty, we want our hearts to be filled with the memories. So that's how all you got your names, and that's all I got to say about that. So now get out of that pot. Go help your daddy in the garden. I'm gonna leave the water in though, and you'll be able to play again this evening. I love you kids, don't you never doubt that. Your names is all about love, and that's the God's honest truth.
We have another new reader this evening, Kelly Duncan.
Mally.
All right. Let's see. Let's read a couple poems. First one, does everybody know who Melville Dewey is? Dewey Decimal System? Earl Hamner?
Yeah.
Okay. First one is Like to Listen. Her heroes were Melville Dewey and Earl Hamner. if these two were one man and found to be reciting the entire list of decimal classifications, she would be as defined her as Sutter's Mill, as in heaven, as in love, and like to listen. Let's see. This one, more kind of a January poem, you know, right after Christmas, you take everything down, it's kind of blah. So, it's called Winter's Way. Winter wiled his way today, as the holidays last I put away. Bright lights from tree and bush and eave went into box and out to leave in hibernation. No source no more of light and joy, only chore all done. And alone the civil sun, low above the brisk cold wind, warms me meekly from sky's blue bend. I ceded to winter his way today, while the holidays last I put away, bethinking myself what chides him round, nipping heel some guardian hound, is spring with life and warmth and wide, she will show in 3 months' time. Then winter must yield to another yet, at first some scornful lady met, that soon smiles broadly inviting me, come forget the barren tree. Okay, one more. This is a fun one for last. It's kind of, I like to write some rhyming kid stuff too, so this is called, my sister loves this. It's called Ricky Dickle's Nickel Pickle. Ricky Dickle found a nickel in his pickle. The pickle did cost him a dime. He said to the grocer as he bit it in two, just half will do me this time. The grocer said, Ricky, you can't be so tricky. A half-eaten pickle makes others feel icky. I'm not being tricky, just ask my dad Mickey. To have no buyer's fickle, put a dime in the pickle, and you'll sell them all whole and right quickie. That's it.
Thank you. Our next reader is Avram Friedman, who has many sage things to say about plumbing.
Okay.
Plumber.
I just have to set the camera right for me, please. Okay. I think.
Let's get Ian to point at you.
So, for people who have not been here previously and heard me begin this novel, this is from a novel I'm in the process of writing called The Truth About Plumbing. And I'm going to read the last paragraph where I left off, just so that you are not left standing and thinking, what's he talking about? There is no compromising with the need for water. It is life or death. As a plumber, you are recession-proof and will always be financially secure, as long as you avoid litigation. A word about litigation. Plumbers get sued all the time. They are the ultimate scapegoats, blamed for the fickle nature of the physical universe. Sometimes when things go wrong, as things ultimately will, it can be argued that legally it is the poor plumber's fault for being human and succumbing to the inherent pressures of the profession. There is a high incidence of alcoholism and drug abuse among those economically imprisoned by this condition. And even for those with a moral and spiritual fiber to withstand such temptations, breathing in PVC glue, solder, and flux vapors all day long can also have a less than favorable impact on the perception of reality. Elbows, nipples, unions, washers, and wire brushes combined with various volatile organic compounds can begin to mix psychedelically with spiders, webs, centipedes, snakes, and all other things frequently encountered in a narrow crawl space to form an environment similar to something that might be found in a Lewis Carroll novel. You might find yourself asking a passing mouse or an upside-down bat hanging from a floor joist for directions to the kitchen sink, for example. But more often than not, when a plumber gets sued, it is due to a circumstance beyond his or her reasonable control. Building contractors often lament that plumbers get paid considerably more than carpenters, believing their own knowledge base is much broader than someone who merely fits pipes together. But this myth can quickly be dispelled by comparing the size and contents of a building code book with that of the plumbing code. The plumbing code is more than twice the thickness and filled with terms and references that challenge technical engineers and architects who often get it wrong. The plumbing code is an enormously complex compilation of guidelines defining acceptable practices for configuring supply, waste, and vent piping. It encompasses the different type pipe and fitting material options on the market, the size of pipes needed for different dimensions of buildings from one to multi-story, the accommodations needed for physically challenged people, and special adaptations needed for unusual circumstances such as island sinks and situations in which traditional venting is impossible or impractical. To compound this complexity, during every session of the state legislature in each state, the plumbing code is revised to accommodate new materials, new fixtures, and new scientific findings that changed what was believed to be the faulty thinking of the past. Sometimes, in subsequent years, the code reverts back to the old way when it was found that the new way was based in theory but not practice and doesn't work in the real world. There are 6-hour annual continuing education courses available to help plumbers keep track of all this. Much time is spent in these classes debating the various interpretations of the changes. In each county, the local state plumbing inspector has the discretion to enforce his or her own interpretation. If the plumber isn't aware of the current inspector's interpretation and is forced to redo a job at considerable expense, he can be sued by the builder, business, or homeowner. Compounding all this is the fact that faulty materials are not uncommon in the plumbing supply industry. Pipe walls can be rendered thin by a manufacturing extrusion process at the manufacturing plant. Bits and pieces of cardboard or wood will somehow find themselves embedded in a copper elbow, preventing a complete solder seal. PVC pipe and fittings can become hard and brittle when sitting on shelves exposed to heat or light for too long. Invisible cracks in plastic fittings can occur during the manufacturing or shipping process. If a leak occurs and building damage results, all will be blamed on the plumber and he will be sued. In the 1980s, polybutylene pipe was touted as the modern miracle that would permanently solve the age-old problem of freeze damage to plumbing supply lines. This material expands and survives temperatures down to 60 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. The pipe will never break, the manufacturers promised. Polybutylene became the standard in new building development, replacing copper and CPVC pipe throughout the country. Then, in the 1990s, reports started coming in that the crimped fittings were leaking in some areas of the country. It turns out that chlorinated water reacts with polybutylene, and over time, the pipe deteriorates to the point at which it is no longer sealed by the highly engineered copper crimp rings. Huge housing projects in many cities were totally destroyed. This is a true story, by the way. Many homeowners were faced with the expense of having to replace their entire plumbing systems. A massive class action lawsuit resulted in costing the manufacturer billions of dollars. But first, the plumber was sued. Litigation is part of the plumbing business. Extensive liability insurance, bonding, and using the services of a local attorney are built-in expenses. In the beginning. This chapter, I should say, the main chapter is called Becoming a Plumber. So, in the beginning, visiting the promised land. Here, I will begin to autobiographize to illustrate a typical path that leads to an individual's plumberization. In the process, new words may be manufactured as needed. In 1971, at age 21, I had no intention of becoming a plumber, intending to move to Israel on a spiritual quest while learning how to farm and live out the rest of my life peacefully in a secure and meaningful communal setting. Reality shortly intervened. My arrival in August came in time to harvest peppers, eggplants, and later artichokes. Learning to drive a tractor became a useful skill as the agricultural season drew to an end and the rain and cold began to descend in late November. Each resident who intended to stay the winter had to find a useful and productive non-agricultural related job on the kibbutz to justify one's presence. Kibbutz Gezer was a relatively small community located on 1,000 acres of land on the Israeli side of the West Bank border, defined by the Latrun Road that connected Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. 23 years earlier, in 1948, during Israel's War of Independence, Gezer had been overrun by the Jordanian army. 17 residents died in the attack, and the community was abandoned, being too close to the hostile border for Israel's fledgling and under-equipped army to safely defend. But after the 1967 war and the return of the West Bank to Israeli control, the decision was made to revive Gezer with its fertile farmland for agricultural production. There were about 40 small, very basic, unheated stone duplex houses with shared kitchens and bathrooms. There was a central dining hall building, a small building that served as a recreation center, and a few other assorted sheds and enclosed spaces that served various utilitarian functions. The year before my own pilgrimage took place, the Israeli government had decided to lease the property to a group of young American immigrants who were affiliated with a synagogue and Jewish community on Long Island in New York. There were already 40 to 50 residents living there when I arrived. The houses and other buildings were in disrepair when the first new residents arrived. The existing plumbing was primitive, neglected, and largely dysfunctional. A deep well provided the only source of water, which was highly mineralized and difficult to swallow if taken straight and warm from the well. There was no working hot water, with the exception of the dining hall's kitchen served by a passive solar water heater that somehow survived the stagnation of the past 22 years. The entire community drainage and septic system needed replacement. There were water supply leaks everywhere. The old iron pipes were rusty and brittle. So when winter set in, I was given the opportunity to join the crew working on plumbing repair and replacement. There was not a single experienced plumber among us. Like people of the cave through a crack in the time-space continuum, had suddenly found themselves in the 20th century, we learned one hard lesson at a time how to dismantle old rusty pipes without damaging either adjacent fixtures, fittings, or the pipes themselves. It didn't always work. At first, we had little or no replacement parts or proper plumbing tools. The first lesson I learned was that it was possible to unscrew an old rusty iron pipe from a corrosion-pitted elbow without damaging either significantly through careful preparation and patience. Put one pipe wrench jaw facing down on the pipe itself and a second on the elbow wrench handle resting on the ground, jaw facing up. Extend the first wrench with a 3-foot piece of iron pipe for added leverage. Heat the joint with a propane torch for a minute or two. Slowly lean down on the extended first wrench until the pipe moves counterclockwise within the joint. Once the pipe joint's corrosion bond has been broken in this way, it's just a matter of unscrewing the pipe the rest of the way. This is a one-person operation for a skilled plumber, but it took 2 or 3 of us to hold everything in place as we learned the dynamics. This one lesson would serve me hundreds, if not thousands of times during my subsequent plumbing career. Inevitably, in the process of repairing or replacing old plumbing parts, there will be some point in the system at which an aging part will have to be left intact, undamaged, to which the new will be attached. One of the earliest tasks of the kibbutz plumbing crew was the repair and replacement of water heaters in the duplex houses. None of these were in working condition. Most had developed leaks and were shut off by old rusty gate valves. The electrical elements were corroded beyond recognition and welded by rust to the tanks, impossible to disassemble. Every tank in each of the buildings needed replacement. They were small tanks, no larger than 20 gallons, but when we began this daunting task, the first tank looked big, heavy, and foreboding, located in a small loft-like space above a closet next to the kitchen. It took about 2 hours to figure out how to disconnect the pipes and wires without flooding the house or electrocuting ourselves. To our surprise and relief, the empty tank was much lighter than our imaginations had anticipated. When finally safely lowered to the floor, the tank became an object of prolonged meditation as the 4 of us involved in the operation stood over it, the quandary lingering in the air. So now, what do we do?
Our next reader is Earl Wheeler.
I graduated from Western in '96. Edited the literary magazine and a few of the newspapers. My first job after that was Walmart. Went a little downhill from there. I spent a little time in prison. I just involved fire, and been on amnesiac drugs for 12 years. They took me off, and when they took me off, all I remember was the bad stuff. It was all the good stuff I forgot. I worked as a professional wrestler for a few years. Been hit by a few chairs like these. And I tell you, they're a little more comfortable to get hit with than to sit at. In any case, once I came out of the drugs, I had a few things to write. I'm shopping it around. We'll see what happens. Don't be afraid, don't be offended. The law of love, he who is permanent. Sandy works here, has a dagger tattooed on her neck. She's going back to school for something, cosmetology, I think. Too bad about that neck tattoo. She'd be pretty otherwise. It wouldn't look so sad. This 180-pound, clean-faced deputy says I'm trespassing. Wants my name. My fucking name, son. You can't stop me. You think you can, but I know the law. His claw pulled tight against your palm, release but not again. His white paw when he died in grass, light and thin and ready. A rose gold wedding ring, a humor from your life. And you dyed your hair red, like I always wanted. They can make new clones of the dead, animals from atoms. It's more simple than a man or a woman, or a woman and a man. And bring lost epochs back again, and nothing has to die. I'll write you when I find out more. It's been 15 years. Movie preview. This girl, Adele, is 25 and drunk and thinks I'm someone famous. Shows me all her 45s and fetish magazines, and Mego dolls, and cartoon glasses, tapes of rare Los Mondo films, her lipstick, bright red panties, and inside a dirty mirror. I tell her that I'm nothing. I don't know if she gets it. In her doll, glass eyes behind $5 dark sunglasses. This was years ago, vintage now. This one is actually out for submission. I don't consider this an active publication, so it'll be safe. They like vinyl records now again. All the girls with vinyl records love Bukowski, and they love the boys who read Bukowski up until it's time to pay the rent. Then it's not so hot anymore now, is it? Then those hard, thin, hard boys in button shirts who drink IPAs and hate their fathers lose a little sweaty luster. Nothing sells out faster than a woman who has loved Bukowski for one slick, hot, wet summer week. This is from. This is all from a chapbook I'm hoping to get published. Heavenly Fish. Laura had these straight cut bangs. You know, they really did me in. And a weird obsession with these independent movies. I always had to match one up for each monster tape I rented, and I rented a lot of monster tapes. Movies made by lesbians for lesbians were made by lesbians to shock the men, or by closet pornographers. Just women fucking, one scene of fucking, horrible fucking, fake, everything, crying. None of them were very good. Can't they at least put just one radioactive Frankenstein in these movies? Is that too much to ask?
It's expensive.
Our next reader is Tom Baker, who has also read it in many a reading. Welcome, Tom.
I want to say something that I am proud and honored to be amongst you guys. There are many great writers and readers here, and I appreciate you for putting this together. And you know, I think it's a great thing that we're doing here. I am in the process of trying to write memoir, and our illustrious friend Gary said there's a few good memoirs and maybe 100 bad ones, and I'm working on 101. So, anyway, for me it's a bit of a healing process from Nam, And I started out kind of funny, and I've read some here, and it's starting to get a little more serious, but some of these pieces are just the beginning, so bear with me. The jump wing pinning ceremony was over by 1500 hours, and my buddy Mike Bledsoe and I headed towards the Trailway bus station about a mile from the main Fort Benning gate. Bledsoe was from Knoxville, and our plan was to catch a bus to Knoxville where my wife could pick me up. It was only a couple hours ride across the Smokies to our house. It was here that Mr. Murphy came riding up again. The bus tickets were more expensive than we thought, and between us we could only get as far as a small town in northwest Georgia by the name of Dalton. Hell, it's not far from Dalton to Knoxville now, man. Bledsoe, we can thumb from there. Well, ordinarily, that was true. But then back then, most people would pick up a GI in uniform. But we hit Dalton, Georgia at 0200 hours. And there wasn't a light on anywhere except for the small diner that served as a diner and a bus station. No cars, just a lonely, dark stretch of blacktop leading north towards Knoxville. Highway 411 was empty of traffic. We let the other passengers offload the bus while we counted our last bit of change. Between us, we added exactly $2.76. Bledsoe even pulled his pockets inside out to show me he wasn't hiding anything. Oh, hell, I moaned, looking north up the deserted road. Just ask him how much further that money will take us, grunted Bledsoe. We'll just walk from there. I walked off the bus and opened a squeaky screen door that led into the diner, carrying our money and there's a term for the cap, but I won't use it here, as an offering like an offering to some minor god. I remember looking down at my spit-shine jump boots and wondering what the hell was I going to say. The bus driver was sitting at the corner sipping coffee as I walked up to him. He turned and looked me over as I approached. Great, I thought to myself, he probably hates GIs. Sir, I stammered, how far toward Knoxville would, I coughed from embarrassment, $2.76 take me and my buddy. I stood there expecting a laugh or some snide remark, but was surprised to hear, son, that money won't take you very far. But if you two are asleep in the back of the bus when I start up, the next stop is Knoxville. With that said, he turned back toward his coffee and a slice of apple pie that the waiter had brought him. I struggled with the urge to salute, but instead I did a half-decent about-face and fast walked out of the diner towards the bus. Bledsoe looked expectantly at me as I passed him. Just get in the bus and go to sleep. I'll tell you in the morning. Now these memoirs pieces they're true stories, and I'll move on a little bit to get into Nam. I was 11 Bravo, wanted to go to Ranger School, and they sent me to Rigger School, and I'm flying out of Cameron. We took a C-123 from Cameron to Fubai with several grunts headed to Camp Eagle and a pallet of ammo headed God knows where. The C-123 shot through a low gap about 2 miles from the airfield and began to reverse props for braking power before we touched down. Not good. Either a very short runway or the need for a quick touchdown. Turned out to be both. Chuck had been hitting the airfield every night for several days, so the pilots wanted to get the hell out of there as soon as possible. We checked in at the orderly room and then settled into our hooch, which was an old French building way too close to the helicopters, which was the nightly targets of the VC. Next day we began the boring job of rigging out skid loads for resupply to Quezon, which was getting hammered about 100 miles northwest of us. The Marines were in a slugfest both at Quezon and the city of Way, but it was Quezon where they were in dire need of resupply. It was way too hot for a plane to land, thus the skid loading. The pallets of ammo or sea rations or water, which was critical, were pulled out of the back of a C-123 or a C-130 by a drag chute as the plane flew about 8 or 10 feet off the runway. Hairy, but it worked. The 2nd Battalion of the 101st was getting its ass kicked, and Colonel Myers, the battalion CO, needed a QRF, or a quick reaction force, to help the grunt unit. In order to volunteer for the QRF, you had to have 11 Bravo MOS. Perfect. Bledsoe and I raised our hand. Anything to get out of this rear echelon shit. At least that's what we thought. A couple of clicks up the valley from the airfield was a special forces camp that housed a company of ARVNs and a group of mountain yards that worked well with the SF guys. One night around the 7th day of my tour, that compound got hit by a combined force of VC and NVA. The grunt units had their hands full trying to push towards Way to help the Marines to retake the city, so Colonel Myers called for the QRF. First Sergeant said, "Get your shit together, people, we're moving out shortly." He left us wide-eyed and a little unsure what was coming. I'd wanted this, so what was the problem, soldier? I kept asking myself that question, and I rechecked my gear. I took a deep breath, and I waited. Wasn't long before Sergeant Moore, our platoon sergeant, stepped into the hooch. His Ranger tab, I had so wanted to go to Ranger school. His Ranger tab seeming to rub in my face. "I want you people to write your last will and testament letter. Who gets what and all that shit. Leave it on your bunk when you finish." He left, and we all silently began writing out our wills. Talk about sobering. One by one, we finished that heavy task and walked outside to settle on the sandbags that surrounded every hooch. The sky above and around the SF compound was lit up like the 4th of July. Probably why I still get a little unsettled about fireworks to this day. As we watched with our M14s lying across our laps, we seen an old C-147 gunship nicknamed Puff, as in the Magic Dragon, sprayed death and destruction from its miniguns and automatic 40 Mike all around the compound. Damn, I would hate to be on the receiving end of that shit running somebody. Then the rest of us just watched and on. Around 0300, platoon sergeant came back. One of the grunt units is mopping up the perimeter of the compound. They don't need us. So we're going to sweep the main village for any damn VC who might be hiding there. We're moving out in 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes later, we're headed out for the main gate. First time you step outside the wire and gnaw is a scary feeling. It's the Badlands. It's engine country. When you're 19 and this is what you wanted, this is what you trained so hard for, what is the spirit of the bayonet? To kill. That's what. You shout that to yourself over and over. Just do your job, soldier. We walked along both sides of the road leading from the fire base out to the village that lay about a halfway to the SF camp. Sergeant Moore was walking point. The LT and his RTO walked about 10 yards back. We followed like school children. The village was just beginning to stir when we approached the outskirts of what had probably been in existence for 500 years. Check every damn hooch and keep your eyes open, bellowed Moore as he clicked off the safety on his M14 and headed down the center of the village. Not all of us had M16s yet, so it was M14s for us. The LT just watched with his RTO standing by his side. We spread out. Bledsoe's off to my right as I approached the first hut. My eyes dart everywhere and we see nothing. Chickens, hogs, a few old people, smoking fire pits, and poverty. No VC. Hell, they could all be VC. I didn't know. What does a VC look like anyway? Will he say, "Hey, I'm a VC, you want to shoot me?" My mind spins as I walk towards the first hut in my front. M14 feels hot in my sweaty hands. My heart beats a little faster than normal. What the hell am I looking for? My mind screamed just as I saw movement. Heart began to race. The M14 swung automatically until the barrel was pointed at the entrance of the hut. Then a small child walks out of the hut. A girl, maybe 3, 4, her face round, her eyes bright with innocence. We'd all heard the tales of how the VC would strap grenades on children and then somehow blow them up around GIs. Was this little girl a weapon? I stopped dead as a child walked towards me. Sometimes you have to make decisions about life and death in a heartbeat, Les. I made my choice that morning. I wasn't going to kill that child just to save myself. Bledsoe was 20 or 30 feet away, so it was just me, the little girl, and whatever God's put people in these situations. I shifted my M14 forward arms as the child walked up and stopped about 2 feet away. Okay, this could be it, I thought. The scene would have been comical to the gods, but not to me until she smiled. Hell, you could have knocked me over with a feather. Our eyes met, my heart melted, and the world stood still for a second. I barely heard Sergeant Moore's voice shout, "What the hell are you doing, Baker? Give her a Hershey bar and let's go." Neither me nor the child looked towards Moore, but I remember taking a Hershey bar out of my pocket, kneeling down and handing a chocolate bar to this tiny piece of life. I didn't know what to say, so I just winked at her and smiled. She smiled back, then turned and walked back to her home. I didn't search that hut. Was the whole incident meant to keep me out of that hut? I'll never know. I just hope that child remembers at least one friendly American soldier.
Our next reader is Gary Carden.
Well, I don't know whether I'm gonna follow that.
Follow you for
Oh, bear with me. I'll get there. I've been working on a thing called the Cherokee Chronicles. I might lose interest and quit anytime, but I was passionately interested this week, and I was writing hell over leather just as hard as I could because I spent a third of my life in Cherokee, and I've got a lot to say about it. But then those kids got killed, and that sort of threw me. And I hadn't been able to write since, but at least I can write what I got before it stopped me dead in my tracks. When I was 15, I thumbed to Cherokee and I got a job washing dishes in the Cherokee bus station. I thought Cherokee was a magic place back then, and washing the dishes in the bus station was the price that I was willing to pay to spend a few hours in a place that was as fascinating as the Land of Oz. The manager was a nice lady named Winona Dye, and she was concerned about how I was going to get home because I wasn't going to get off from work until midnight. There wasn't no bus to Sylva, but I assured her I'd be okay. And so when I left that night, I walked out 441 at midnight, and the highway was mighty quiet. I walked out past Hall's Motor Court, Max Indian Village. There was nothing but night sounds, cows, horses, an occasional mule. By the time I got to Gateway, I was convinced that nobody was going to pick me up. I might need to just tell you, how many of you know how Gateway got its name? roughly? Tell me.
It was supposed to be the gateway to the Smokies.
That's right. They thought the whole world was going to open up and we were all going to be rich. And so they put a huge arc over the road there that said, Gateway to the Smokies. And there was another one down in Bryson City, you know, same thing. And of course, none of them paid off. But this is totally a deserted place now, but it's called Gateway. It's a nice community there, a couple of houses, and an old Esso station. I was convinced nobody's going to pick me up. The few cars that passed me seemed to be driven by terrified drivers who wanted to get 441 behind them just as quick as possible. I stopped at Harry Shelton's Esso station at Gateway. It was closed, but there was over 100 junk cars behind the station, and all of them had a car seat. So I slept a while in a wrecked Buick with wonderful cushioned seats. When I woke up, it was a spring morning, and it was breaking over Gateway, and the world was filled with birdsong, and so I walked back to Cherokee and spent the day prowling through craft shops and archery ranges. Used to be a lot of those in the old Cherokee. I visited 6 different chiefs who all had great South Dakota headdresses on that flowed down their backs and rose up over their heads like angry turkeys. I watched Standing Deer nail that bull's eye every time, and then he would hold out his hand and say, "Tip, tip." They all spoke Cherokee, and every one of them taught me to say, "Hello, how are you? How do you like your life?" I noticed that the Cherokee words were not the same that was used by all the chiefs, and I suspected that maybe the message was not what they said it was. Once in a teepee restaurant, I cautiously tried my memorized Cherokee. Beautiful young waitress. "Sio, Takochi Aguadule." I wasn't too surprised when she slapped me. It was just as I thought. Slap stung a bit and embarrassed me. Lots of people stared at me. Several people asked me what I'd said, and I hadn't the vaguest idea. Those chiefs were a sneaky bunch. There was an amazing amount of noise in Cherokee. I loved it. It was like some huge orchestra playing, car horns and people shouting and drums and organ music and singing and laughing. There's nothing like this in Sylva. Whoa, 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 whoa. Must have meant the page wouldn't want to do that. I ate at the reservation grill. It was managed by my Uncle Allen Ginn. He gave me a free cheeseburger. I stopped at the Cherokee Shooting Gallery and spent all my money shooting little tin birds. I won an ice tray which had a naked woman wading through a ceramic pool. I asked the man that ran the place if he had an ice tray with a horse or a dog. "No," he said, and pointed to rows on rows of naked women wading in the ceramic pools. I decided to give it to my Uncle Albert, who smoked and liked naked women. I discovered that Cherokee was full of pinball machines. And when you stood on Main Street down there, you could hear them all over the place. I loved the ones that sounded like guns that were being fired, and some of them had bells ringing, and my favorites were in the teepee at the restaurant, because they went zap, zap, zap. Oh my goodness, one shop owner, my favorite was Monty Young's craft shop, where he played native music chants, tom-toms and flutes. However, when I went in the shop, none of the records were Cherokee. That didn't really matter to me, since it all sounded like the movie Broken Arrow, which was my favorite movie because it starred Deborah Paget as Princess Sansia Ray, a blue-eyed Apache princess. By the time I got back to the bus station, Miss Di was surprised to see me back and asked me how I got home and back, and I told her the truth, and she patted me on the head and said, "I'm going to do you a favor. You're fired." And she explained that she was not going to be responsible for being run over out on 441 in the dark. And when I found a ride that would take me back and forth, she'd give me my job back. She gave me $5, and I asked her if she'd change it up into quarters so I could go up to the teepee and play the pinball machine. And the owner had an organ up there, and she sometimes played the Yellow Rose of Texas and Down Yonder. That's the end of the first one. That was called Paradise Has Pinball Machine. The next one is called Tomahawks, Crisco Lard Buckets, and Best Barker.
Okay.
I eventually found a ride back to Sylva, where I found my grandmother, who said she was fit to be tied. "Where have you been? Where did you spend the night?" I told her I had a job, which impressed her so much she left me alone and let me go to bed, and I slept late. And I'd heard that there was a butcher, meat cutter, working in Cherokee, and he left every morning for the Buckner Curtis grocery store, which was behind the bus station across the river. He left at 7 every morning with a car full of teenage girls who worked in craft shops, and he agreed to pick me up at the old cherry tree below my grandparents' house every morning. And in addition, I found I could catch a bus to Waynesville at midnight. And although I had to wait 3 hours in Waynesville before I could get a bus to Sylva, it wasn't ideal. But before long, I tired of those 3 hours sleeping on a bench in front of the Waynesville bus station before I could get a ride home. And the teenage girls who were working for Homer Burgess, who owned several craft shops, assured me that I could get a job with him. And I would be able to keep the same hours as they did. And so I quit the bus station and I went to work making tomahawks and drums. The work was carried out in the basement of a craft shop, where 2 other employees and I sat between bins full of Crisco lard cans and black rubber discs. We stretched the rubber discs over the lard cans and laced them with leather strings. After that, we painted them black. Homer bought the drumsticks by the bushel. He sold these for $3, and he sold out every week. The tomahawks were river rocks, which we gathered out of the river, flat, oblong. We had a barrel full of handles, which were split on one end, and so we tied the stick at the top. The finished touch was 3 or 4 colored feathers, usually red or blue, which were glued to the tomahawk. And each morning we hung those tomahawks and those drums from the porch roof of the craft shop, and they looked very festive, and they were gone in no time at all. Years later, I would hear Chief Taylor tell a TV commentator that Cherokee was the only place in the world where you could sell a rock if you glued a feather on it. When we caught up with our drums and our tomahawks, we could work inside as clerks. And if we sold over $100 worth of merchandise to one customer, we got a free dinner at the Coffee Pot Cafe. Our wages were $12 a week. We were given 1 day off, but it had to be a weekday because weekends were the busiest times. One marvelous spring morning, as we rounded that last curve on 441 before we entered the main drag of the commercial part of Cherokee, we saw a sight that I will carry in my memory for the rest of my life. there in the deep running part of the Oconaluftee, where the morning fog was still heavy, we saw Fess Parker and Buddy Ebsen wading across the river. Both were armed and replete in buckskins. Walt Disney was in Cherokee, filming Davy Crockett. The sun was just rising in Cherokee, and Fess and Buddy were magnificent as they advanced cautiously in the surging river. Above them on the bank was a film crew and a host of folks busily filming. Like my grandmother, I was fit to be tied. There was no work for me today. No, sir. Within minutes, I was out of that car and deep in the audience of the local kids who hung on every moment. The big surprise came when Fess raised his rifle and shot what looked like an Iroquois warrior from the top of a rock near the river. And that Iroquois come crashing down, made a hell of a splash, floated away down the river. Later I saw him get out of the river and wade up the bank, and somebody gave him a towel. Later that day, I saw him in the reservation grill, and lo and behold, I knew him. It was Mickey Littlejohn, who sometimes drank coffee with me at the Cherokee bus station, and he told me that he got paid every time he was shot, and that he had been shot 5 times the first day. Damn! I wanted to be shot. I wanted to drop my tomahawk and tumble into the Oconaluftee at $25 a shot. It beats the hell out of rubber tom-toms and feathered rocks. End of that chapter. Last chapter. We Cherokees are a peaceful people. If you don't recognize that, that's my favorite line from Unto These Hills. Okay, in my memory, the time that Walt Disney Studios spent in Cherokee was a wonderful time. It was filled with excitement and colorful stories. Disney paid well, and many of the teenagers in Cherokee quit their jobs at Boundary Tree or Newfound Lodge and became camp followers. That meant they followed that film crew in the hopes that they'd be hired for something. Any job that Disney might have paid was paid threefold what you could make in their local businesses. In times, the merchants and the tribal officials all complained to Disney, and they asked him to stop doing that. Then the plush jobs began to vanish. Still, it was a wonderful time, and several Cherokees who chiefed. That meant they wore an elaborate costume and stood in front of some of the craft shops with the big South Dakota headdresses on, and the craft shop owners thought that the chiefs acted as a magnet on the tourists and drew them into the businesses. And so some of the chiefs told me that Disney had already hired them to go with him to Texas to fight in that bloody battle at the Alamo, because Disney said they looked pretty much like Mexicans to him. And that meant they could be Mexican soldiers in the siege of the Alamo. Even Mickey Littlejohn went with the studio. He told me he was in the hope that he had a movie career. Large numbers of college students began to appear in Cherokee, and that added to the congestion and the traffic on the main drag as they cruised slowly back and forth. Mormons began to appear in the downtown area and around the schools, and by the time I had my best job, which was working for Roger Shelton and his Dairy Queen, I got preference for the job because my Uncle Albert had been in the Navy, and he gave me his whites, which was the ideal uniform for a Dairy Queen employee. And in addition, Rogers talked me into living in a little playhouse in his front yard. I think that damn thing is still there. It had a bed and a mattress. but the bed was so large it was impossible to open the door. I had to crawl in the window each night. And further, Roger's mother agreed to fix my breakfast. If I went home and brought back eggs and a loaf of wholesome bread. I then walked to Cherokee to work each day. The walk was about 2 miles. I changed clothes in the back of the Dairy Queen. I split my work hours with a fellow named Kenneth Parker, who got so fat from drinking butterscotch milkshakes he couldn't get his clothes on anymore. The Mormons held class each day in the fairgrounds and attempted to recruit the Cherokee teenagers to go to Brigham Young. Since they drank a lot of milkshakes, I got to know them pretty well. They gave me a copy of their Bible, which was the Book of Moroni, who was the angel who brought Joseph Smith the golden plates. They explained that the Cherokees were God's chosen people, since they were here before the white man was. In the midst of all this, tour buses began to come. Showed up in Cherokee, the campers packed the campgrounds, and now comes the drama. Unto these hills. Things happened very fast that first summer of the drama. The drama was written by Kermit Hunter, who was one of the Carolina playmakers, and along with Paul Green, promoted outdoor drama. In a short time, a half-dozen historical dramas were all running in North Carolina, including Lost Colony and followed by Horn in the West. The Tragic Trail of Tears was an ideal subject for Cherokee, since it meant that the removal of the Cherokees to the west, which was a historical fact, would be the heart of the drama. In addition, it had a built-in tragedy, which was the execution of a Cherokee named Sally, which gave the entire thing a tragic sadness. The year I was a senior in high school, the Cherokee Historical Association offered 3 free tickets to any Sylva student who could write an essay on the Trail of Tears. I won those 3 tickets. So when the drama began its second year, I was there with my 2 cousins. We saw the green corn dance. We witnessed the coming of DeSoto. We saw the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. We watched the meeting of the president in Washington with the Cherokees, and where the Cherokees repeated often, "We Cherokees are a peaceful people." Nobody in Washington believed it. After a number of false starts and tragic episodes, Washington, the place, not the president, told the Cherokees they had to go because white settlers wanted their land. And so my cousins and I, we watched the sad exodus as 10,000 Cherokees trudged away into the sunset. It was during the final months of the removal when an elderly Cherokee named Sally became angry when the soldiers mistreated his wife. He grabbed a rifle from a soldier and shot him. Then he fled into the Smokies with his sons. The general in charge of the removal was very angry, but he offered Sally a deal. Come down, come in and be executed for your crime, and we will let those Cherokees that we have not yet captured remain here in their homeland. According to the drama, Sally agreed. He came down with his sons, his family members. They posed center stage, and he said, "I come to die for my people." Well, I'm a sucker for a good tearjerker. As Sally stood like a ballet dancer facing the audience, the drums began to roll. A deep baritone voice announced over the sound system, "I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills." And then an old Cherokee fell on his the minister fell on his knees and proclaimed the same prayer in Cherokee. The dry ice machine cranked up backstage. It sent great rolls of fog out onto the stage. The execution squad did a dramatic ready, aim, fire, and Sally sank in the fog. Wow! Now dry in the theater. Then a final touch. Somebody released 20 white doves backstage, and they flew away in the fog. It was all a lie, of course. Many years later, when I come to work in the Cherokee Museum, I read the actual account of Sally's execution. There was no deal. Sally was actually brought in by one of his best friends, and he was in chains. And there was no regimented firing squad. Sally and his followers were shot just outside Bryson City, and their bodies left in a ditch. There was no grave. There was no honorary marker. I met some old timers recently, and I asked them about the white doves. They had been working in the drama all of their life. Well, we admitted them after a couple of years, said one of the guys. He had been passing out programs in the theater for 40 years. It was just a bit much, you know, those doves. But such is the nature of the truth. My friend old Sally was still a hero. He just didn't die for his people. He did say, we Cherokees are a peaceful people. Said it often in the drama. Sally often attended meetings in Washington where he helped shape treaties and policy. Sally was a poor elderly farmer, so he didn't do any such thing. But he makes us proud when he speaks in the drama. And now, 50 years later, I've read a lot of Cherokee history. The Trail of Tears is still a shameful blot on American history. But 20 white doves, that's a different kind of shame, you know. Thank you.
Our final reader is Wanda Mills.
Son of a gun. Thank you.
So I think we're short a few, so if you can share with your partner sitting next to you, just let me know. And then I'll collect them again at the end.
See that?
Thank you. I have it.
It was a beautiful bright morning, and the crazy driver rolled my foot off the red lamp and handed me my purse and went back. watching my watch, I realized I was about 20 minutes over of work. The thought of my mind to stay outside for 2 minutes and enjoy the fresh morning air. Then I remembered that a popular record card on my desk and decided to go in and begin my day. I have been working at hat office for about 4 years. I had worked several jobs before, thinking about grant money, but meant each job had been short term. The job at the youth justice was in my mind my first real job. I felt very glad to have this job. As a child, I had thought it would be so cool to work in the old courthouse. I would take a job in the tax office, my dream to be paid at a glance, without a glance, with an office in the justice system. I was so excited. There wasn't anyone in the main office for most of my homework to work in the small cubicle. As I went back to my office, my job was to put popular record cards in the mail for order and then pile the cards. It wasn't long until I heard a laugh and chatter from the main office. I knew my coworkers had arrived. Being a radio buff that I am, I always had my movie profile book. After a while, I became aware of how quiet was in my office. Then I remembered this morning was a week that I didn't attend the meeting, but I've been proud. I was in the log and then make the stick. And in a minute, I heard keys rattle and the office door open. I chuckled and I thought the bulb rotten came out again. And he passed my office. I wish him a good morning. He turned on me with a blanket wet on his face. What are you doing here? He asked gently. I was here, remember? I said, "Sylva, get your purse and let's get out of here." The bombs went, and everyone was told to evacuate the building and meet in the far end of the hospital. My supervisor said with him, please not work here for the hospital. Oh God help! I stayed with my kids and was very obvious that I was upset. Why did you leave the office with everyone else? Well, he asked. No one told me. I thought. The supervisor was shocked to learn that my coworkers hadn't told me not help me push me out of the building in my wheelchair. Now that I have my moonlight chair and the danger, I'm the first one out
I have to get hydraulic so you can jump over the crowds. That's all me, so
I believe that concludes our reading for tonight. There are many tragically unhappy names over there with their names on them. Our March meeting is actually only 2 weeks from tonight. The other nights are pretty much taken, so it'll be March 9th. We'll be seeing as many of you as can manage it back here soon.
You're doing a good job here, thank you.
Yeah. Me and David